Hi, everyone. Okay, so we are nearing the end of the semester now. In fact, technically, this is like the last lecture, but I'm going to divide it into two parts. So once again, I have like one big thing of PowerPoint slides, but I will kind of like separate everything up into two different lectures. So I'm just going to get through some slides and then we'll stop and then I'll just do a video wearing the same exact thing in the same exact place right after this. But it still is covering two chapters of your book. I just feel like it all kind of like bleeds together and I'd rather present it as one package. I call this section just generally entertainment, unintended media effects, kind of like all of the things that we like to talk about in terms of like, oh, the media did this, the media did that. Usually negative effects, but we'll talk about that a little bit too. It's not so simple. So let's just start off. I've probably been using this term all semester, but maybe now would be a good time to define it. What we even mean when we say media effect. This isn't rocket science. It's really just anything that happens as a result of using media. So if we talk about, people have lower self-esteem because of Fitspiration on Instagram, that would be a media effect. But it could also be things like, when people fall asleep when they watch something, like that's a media effect. Like anything, whenever people are sort of talking about like something the media did, we're talking about some sort of media effect. I also wanted to talk about just this whole idea of media psychology. Media psychology is a field, and I think there's all different types of fields within media. Like there's even media sociology. Um, I, though, consider myself a media psychologist, which means that the methods that I use to do research on media effects, which is what I study, I'm trying to figure out, like, right, what is the media doing to people's brains, or how does it affect our social lives, and things like that. I use a bunch of surveys and experiments and things like that. I use these psychological methods to look at psychological and social, but I consider that psychological effects. So that's kind of how I pair the two. A media psychologist is looking at media effects from a psychological lens, and that is what I do. And so a lot of what we as media psychologists study are what this unit's about. So that's sort of why I put it here. But it's also connected to everything we've already been talking about. So for several lectures now, if you haven't sort of seen the pattern, we've been talking about influence. We've been talking about various types of media influence, persuasion, and health marketing, social marketing, things like that. If the semester was a little bit longer in the summer, I also have a unit on political media effects. And all of these things sort of go under all of these, under this larger umbrella of media effects. But they're usually strategic, right? Even political campaigns, like it's like we are deliberately trying to use the media to persuade people. Advertising, we want people to buy things. Social marketing, we want people to change their health behavior. So the difference between what we're talking about now and what we've been talking about is these aren't intended effects. Usually, these are just things that sort of happen when people. I should have had these up here. Sorry, that would have helped. This is why I try not to use animation in the slides, because like if I can't remember what's there, then whatever. But yeah, all of these things here that you see on the PowerPoint slide are all deliberate attempts to influence people with the media. Like somebody was actually designing these different examples as a way to influence people. But there's all this stuff that there's all these outcomes, there's all these effects that the media could potentially have that aren't necessarily intended. It's not like somebody is out there. I'm not saying it can't happen, but normally, right, it's not like the video game industry is like, oh, we need to try to make people violent. And I don't believe that's actually how it works, but that's just a weird example. Or, oh, I know we need to make people think poorly about this group of people, or whatever. Or we need to make, young people really dissatisfied with their bodies. Like it's not like there's some sort of like conspiracy or strategic effort to make these things happen. And yet we talk about these things a lot because there are some associations between a lot of these outcomes, which do happen to be negative, and different types of media use. So that would be a media effect. That said, it's the way I want you to think about this is like if you're one of these people that does tend to think that the media has a lot of negative effects, there is some evidence to support that. It's not cut and dry, and I don't think you're going to get sort of a clear answer from this class about when it's true and when it's not, because it's very complicated. But if you believe that the media has negative effects, then you would also have to say that the media must have positive effects, because the same sort of influence that can affect us positively should be able to work in the opposite direction and do it negatively and vice versa. And these are some examples of some things that media psychologists like myself study that are actually really positive. One is just enjoyment. There's a whole area of study on leisure studies, how people choose to spend their free time, their leisure time, recreational time. And, one of the ways that we make our lives meaningful is by having things to look forward to and enjoy. And the media is a big source of that. It also helps connect us with other people when we engage in co-viewing and things like that. And that's a really big topic among media scholars, especially people who study entertainment, as you can imagine. We're very interested in what are the aspects of entertainment that make something more or less enjoyable. Learning, which, like back to the social learning theories and everything like that. But, the media is a huge source of education. I often tell people, I'm like, I know you're going to think this is nuts, but I'm really not a big traveler myself. Like, I would rather. I'm like, I would rather sit at home and watch it on my television. I know that's really sad. But again, you guys already know I like to sit at home with my chickens, and I have like a really nice setup here. But I do feel like even though I'm not a huge traveler, I've been able to, it's not the same, but I've been able to experience a lot of things vicariously through the media and learn about different things. Shark Week is a great example of that. Um, there's also this idea, and I actually probably should have talked about enjoyment and this next thing together before instead of going this way. So enjoyment we think about as like, yes, I really enjoyed that. I had a fun time. That was an awesome movie. That was exciting, thrilling, all these things. But that raises the question, okay, if the only reason we consume entertainment media is for enjoyment, then why would anybody go and see Schindler's List, which is a movie about the Holocaust? There are some entertainment media fare that doesn't necessarily fit under the category of fun or, pleasure or whatever. And so the question is why would anybody deliberately want to spend their leisure time watching something that is going to make them sad? Like, why would anybody watch like media where they know the dog is going to die? Aren't those the worst movies, right? It's like if there's going to be an animal, it's going to like, why would anybody want to put themselves through that? Well, there is an answer, and it comes from the study of positive psychology, which basically says that, with everything we do as humans, there's different types of happiness. So we can derive what we call hedonic happiness, which hedonism, it comes from that, like, the word hedonism. If you're a hedonist, you're somebody who seeks out pleasure in the world, and that's sort of like what motivates you. And that's perfectly fine. But there's also a type of happiness called eudaimonia. Eudaimonic happiness is not so much, yay, I'm having a great time happiness, but it's associated with meaningfulness. It's associated with fulfillment. When I teach about this, I always ask my students, like, why would anybody have children? Easy for me to say, I know, because I don't have children, but stay with me for a second. And we talk about all of the bad things about having children. They cost money. You lose sleep. Sometimes they don't even turn out to be good human beings. Like there's all these like really counterintuitive. I mean, it used to be back when everybody had a farm that you would have kids and they would help you plow or whatever. But if you think about it, there's not a lot of reasons to have children that would make people happy. However, this is what the surveys say. The research on this topic actually says that parents, it is true, parents are less happy than non-parents. People who choose to have children are less happy. but that's only if you measure hedonic happiness. If you measure eudaimonia, if you measure fulfillment, parents have higher levels of that kind of happiness. So it's not to say one is better or worse. It's just they're two different types of life experiences. One is more grounded in appreciation, meaningfulness, things like that. And the other is grounded more in hedonism, pleasure, fun, things like that. So, and also there's whatever positive role modeling. I don't care. It goes with the learning. Okay. So another unintended positive effect, and actually this is something that's mentioned in another chapter earlier on when we talked about the media equation, but this is a really big area of study within entertainment studies. So I just wanted to bring it up here, which is the idea of a parasocial relationship. A lot of people thinks this sounds really creepy. We kind of have like a bad taste in our mouth as a society. Like, for instance, have you ever heard somebody criticize somebody for being sad when a celebrity dies? Like a couple of years ago, there were a bunch of celebrities that sort of died around the same time, like David Bowie and Alan Rickman, who played Snape and Harry Potter and stuff like that. And some people were really sad. And I would hear people say, like, why are you getting so sad about a celebrity? Like you didn't even know them. Well, that's kind of the point. If you have a parasocial relationship, it's parasocial because it's not completely social. Social would imply like there's sort of like reciprocity, like it's a two-way thing. Like you're friends, like I call my friend on the phone and they talk back to me. We have a mutual relationship. But if you have a relationship with a celebrity or even a fictional character, it's not really social. You might feel like you know them because maybe you've read a lot about them, or maybe you watch them on TV every day, or maybe you just have a lot in common with them. And so that's made you feel like you have some sort of kinship with them, right? That is just like the word paranormal is not really normal, it's paranormal. Parasocial relationships are parasocial. It's one-sided. I feel like I have a connection with Oprah, but Oprah doesn't even know I exist, right? And that sounds abnormal, but this is where we go back to, remember we talked about the media equation. Media equals real life. Our brains are hardwired to treat everything we see in the media as if it is real life. And we are social creatures. We are social animals who are always looking for opportunities to connect with other people. So the way I always think about it is if you, for instance, read, a 500-page novel that gives you the intimate details about somebody's life, and it doesn't make you feel somewhat connected to them, isn't that more strange than if you do feel connected to them? Like if you didn't, right? Parasocial relationships are completely normal. There's nothing weird about them. And back to there's positive things, positive media effects that can come out of this. One of the reasons we study parasocial relationships is because just like our friends can influence us in our day-to-day lives, they can persuade us, they can make us feel good, all of these great things. Our parasocial friends also can have measurable effects on us in different ways. One example, just one, is what we call the parasocial contact hypothesis. And this is actually a theory about how our parasocial relationships to celebrities or fictional characters can reduce our prejudice towards different types of groups. One example I like to give here was a student told me about, if you've ever seen the show it's an ABC show called Modern Family, there's two of the characters are married gay men. And a student told me how her parents were they were, I mean, I don't know her parents, but she suggested that they may have been homophobic. And they started watching this show on ABC. And over time, she noticed that they had more tolerance towards gay people after watching the show because of the relationship that they had kind of started to develop with the characters on the show. I think that can happen with any sort of group, right? And that's what the contact is like when you have contact with an out group. So if you develop a parasocial relationship with somebody from a group who maybe you harbor some sort of prejudice towards, it can actually make you feel better about that person and their group by extension. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of like this happens in real life. I should have pointed this out at the beginning. This happens in real life too. This happens where if, let's say, let's say you have never known that you've met a trans person before. You probably have, but maybe you didn't know it, right? In that case, it wouldn't affect your attitudes towards um, trans people. Like, let's say you developed a friendship with a trans person, but if you didn't know they were trans, then that's not going to reduce your prejudice towards trans people. The cool thing about the media is that through the media, you're not only going to be more likely to be exposed to people who share these differences so that you can sort of have these kinship forming experiences and reduce prejudice, but you are actually aware that, I mean, that the person is trans. Another great example is mental illness. You might meet a lot of people with various different types of mental illnesses in your life, but if they don't tell you that they have a mental illness, then you're not going to know, for instance, that, oh, my friend Steve has schizophrenia. I never would have guessed, right? So how are you going to like lower your prejudice against people with schizophrenia? Well, that's another great thing about the media, because you meet these characters through the media, you come to understand what their identities are, and then in knowing that and developing a positive parasocial relationship with them, it can affect your prejudice. Okay, last thing for this part of the slides, the other sort of positive thing that can come out of entertainment is what we call mood regulation theories. And there's two of them I want you to know. So one of them is mood management theory. And actually, this isn't as bad as the other theories. Like, these titles kind of make sense for what they are. Mood management theory talks about how we subconsciously choose media to even out our mood state, or to make us feel better, or to level us out, if you will. So an example of this is if let's say you just like had a really stressful day at work, had a stressful day at school, and you come home and you queue up whatever streaming service it is, and you look at all the different options that you can watch, and you're like, whoa, I mean, this looks like a really good thriller, but I need to like calm down because I have been so wound up today and I've been so stressed out. And you decide to watch some sort of comfort food television instead, like the Great British Baking Show or something, like literal comfort food. I don't know. The whole idea is like, you're here and you use media to bring yourself down here. Now, one thing I really want to highlight is this word subconsciously. You can be aware that you're doing bad, that you're making decisions like that. But a lot of times people aren't. There's the research that studies this, does experiments, and then they ask people afterwards, why did they make certain media selections? And people are unaware that they were using it to actually change their emotional state. So even though they can be aware of it, a lot of people do this subconsciously without awareness. So mood management theory is all about how we try to improve our moods, to optimize our moods with different media choices. Mood adjustment theory is similar, but slightly different, and both of these things are true. Mood adjustment is all about subconsciously choosing media to maintain some mood, and it might not be positive. So here's a great example of this. Have you ever experienced like a really tough breakup or something, where, and then if you are feeling really bad or really sad or really hurt about that, mood management theory would say, oh, well, why don't you just go listen to some upbeat music or something? But how many of you have had the experience where actually what you want to do is wallow? What you want to do is you want to listen to like love commiserating music that sort of like maintains your depressed state or whatever. So that's mood adjustment. And it's a different way that we use the media to regulate our mood, but it's the same sort of general principle. So in conclusion, mood management theory is all about improving or optimizing our mood, and mood adjustment is about either maintaining a mood because it benefits us in some way, or getting a mood that's going to like sort of help us out. So like, let's say you're about to, oh, here's another good example, and then I swear I'll shut up. If you need to pump yourself up, right? Like maybe for exercise, or maybe because you're going to have a confrontation with somebody, you might listen to angry music or something to like really pump you up in that way. So, okay, I'll finish the rest of this in another lecture in just a second. So stay tuned, I guess. Bye.